So for those who are listening to this or watching this and don't know, why would they want to keep a low profile? And or maybe save that for when we get to, we'll talk about that when we get to the secret believers, but tell us, why would they want to keep a low profile? Let's assume somebody knows nothing.
Okay, so as I said before, right, that there are one of the worst things you can do for many Jewish people in their minds is to become a believer that Jesus is their Messiah. So therefore, there is also a lot of opposition, right? And we have different, they are called anti-missionary organizations that try to convince Jews not to believe that Jesus are the Jewish Messiah. And they can be very aggressive. So we did ask about this, and some of the congregations have had terrible experiences with, attacks and bombs and knife attacks and.
Okay, so you said two way different things that I got to break down. You said you called them anti-missionaries who try to convince people not to believe in Yeshua, and then you talk about bombs and knives. That sounds like qualitatively different. Am I wrong, or is that the same thing?
Sometimes it's difficult to know exactly who's behind some of these attacks, but it is clear that there are. One thing is convincing people not to believe in Jesus, in Yeshua, and another side is trying to destroy those congregations or Jewish believers that already exists.
And you mean physically destroy? What do you mean by destroy?
In any way possible. Say there was about 10 years ago, I think it is, there was a rally back in Ashdod where one of the rabbis there said that Hitler and Haman wanted to destroy the Jews physically, but the Messianic Jews want to destroy our soul.
You know, I actually was doing an interview with a man from China, and I was sitting in a park. I didn't have anywhere to do it, so we're literally sitting in a park in Jerusalem. This is on video somewhere on the internet, and he says, "Do you believe that Yeshua was a rabbi?" And I started to give my answer, my perspective on it, and there was this person standing there, and he creeps closer and closer. And I'm not a Messianic. I'm not a Christian, right? I'm a Karaite Jew. But I'm talking as a philologist about what I understand from the New Testament. And he's then in the camera and he starts to yell, pointing at me. He says, "This man is worse than Hitler. Hitler wanted to destroy our bodies. This man wants to destroy our soul." And I don't think this man was at the rally in Ashdod, right? No. This is something that's out there in the culture that's floating around. And I said, "You don't even know anything about me. Like, you're making a lot of assumptions." So let's break that down. And I don't know if you can, because you're the Danish. You're actually Danish, right?
Yes.
So you're a Danish evangelical Lutheran pastor. But help me try to break it down. What is going through the mind of someone who says, because he assumed I was a Messianic Jew, why do they think that a Messianic Jew is worse than Hitler and wants to destroy the soul of the Jewish nation? What's the thought behind that?
So there's a lot to unpack there. I don't think we have time to really dive into it. But in my understanding, there has been what we can call a push and a pull from the very beginning, since the first century. A push out of the synagogues and from the Jewish believers, and a pull from the Gentile believers to pull out the Jewish believers from the synagogues. So that's been a trend throughout church history. And church history has not been nice to the Jewish people. Okay. We don't have to look already in the 2nd century and 3rd century, there begins to be anti-Semitism within the church. And there begins to be ideas of the Jew as a wandering Jew and things like this. And it is escalated to burning their synagogues and killing them off and blood libels and all kinds of crazy stuff. So that, of course, creates a very bad attitude toward what it means to be Christian. Now, for many Christians, the cross is a symbol of mercy and is a symbol of God's faithfulness. For many Jews, the cross is a symbol of persecution and death. So and a loss, you can say, of Jewish identity. Because through church history, a lot of the things that were required for a Jew if they became believers, because there's always been Jewish believers in Jesus. One of the things that were required for many of them was that they renounced their Jewish identity. It was a sin to be a Jew. So they had to renounce their Jewish identity and everything Jewish. They had to have their holiday on Sunday and not on Shabbat and all these things, which is trying to suffocate, you can say, the Jewishness within the Christian faith. So I think this is some of the background, back curtain for what's going on here. Through centuries and centuries, this has been cultivated both within the Christian societies and also within the Jewish societies, that the Christians want to kill us off. So now we are in a different situation. Now we have, have great roots movement and all kinds of other things. Christians who want to be more Jewish, Gentiles who want to be more Jewish because of Jesus. But I think that this collective awareness, you can say, in the Jewish society still persists. Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know if that answered your questions at all.
No, but I think that was a very good. I think there's two aspects to, and I want to hear what you have to say. So I'm going to kind of keep my opinions to myself as much as possible here. But I would say there's two aspects here. One is exactly what you said. There's this visceral reaction to Jews that, and the clearest image of this is I grew up in Chicago at the Art Institute of Chicago. At least when I was a kid, I don't know if it's still there. There was this Chagall. And the Chagall shows the pogroms, and it shows a Jew with a talit on a cross. Mm. And the message of the Chagall is that what was done to Jesus 2,000 years ago was done to the Jews in the 19th and the 20th century. And it was done in the name of the cross or through the people who believe in the cross, right? That's what Chagall, I think, was trying to express. And I remember seeing that. I saw that probably 40 years ago, and I still remember it. It had a very powerful impact on me. And so I think there's this visceral response. So if a Jew becomes a Buddhist, nobody really cares. But if a Jew, if a Jew becomes a Christian, I don't know, they care that much either. But if they become a Messianic, it's kind of seen as this fifth column, as this, as well as I do, right? But I'm explaining to the audience. It's seen as well, I'll tell you the way my father's rabbi once said. And he wasn't talking about Messianics. He was talking in general. He said, your worst enemy is the one who wears your uniform because you can't identify him. Mm. It's interesting. It raises all kinds of thoughts for me about some of the issues we have in American culture right now related to gender, for example, which I won't go into. But I think there's some of the same issues going on there. So let's go back to rallies. So you mentioned how there's rallies, and I've seen videos of, I think, in Arad in southern Israel where they're protesting. But still, would you agree that that's qualitatively differently than planting bombs like that? I mean, rallies. It's harassing people is one thing through a rally, but planting bombs, that's terrorism.
Yes. So of course, there's only one congregation that experienced a bomb plane planted that almost killed the pastor's son. But there's been several knife attacks. So of course, there's a difference in what you say and then the action you do.
Yeah.
There's a difference, but inciting to violence is what, many Messianics are afraid that it could happen. So
the bomb incident. So let's talk about the bomb incident.
Okay.
Is that the one where it was on Purim or something?
Correct. Yes.
So that guy was a mentally ill terrorist who also shot a bunch of Arabs, and I think he planted a bomb at a gay nightclub or something like this, if I'm remembering correctly. So this guy was a legitimate mentally ill terrorist who had smuggled weapons from Florida when he made Aliyah. I don't think that represents, I don't know if it's fair to say, but I understand the fear that's created there, right? Yeah, but in some respects, it's not fair to compare that to the guy who's having a rally saying that they're destroying our souls, which, it's kind of obnoxious, but it's really different than planting a bomb, which is,
as I said before also, it's difficult to say who's behind what, right? So I didn't want to say that it was the guys in the rallies or the anti-missionary organizations that planted the ball, but it's all part of the same, collective experiences of the Messianic body here.
Right. So if you're sitting in the pews, all you know is the bomb was planted, and the guy who's out there who's protesting and you from your perspective harassing your congregation, that you don't know, is he the guy who plants the bomb or not? So it's kind of this uncertainty. That's why when people,
and also we have it combined with the knives attacks. So you have.
So I don't know about the knife attacks. Tell us about. I literally don't know about that. What's that?
It happens quite a lot. Comparative, quite a lot. Compared to Christians in Denmark, at least, right? We are not attacked by knives at all. But you'd have, for example, 2017, there was a release of a new Messianic CD from one of the congregations with songs, and for that there was an Orthodox organization showing up. A bunch of people with knives that made the police flee the scene and called in a SWAT team to kind of protect the congregation. So
and that's
just one example.
Yeah, so there are definitely incidents of violence, and I want to acknowledge that. There was one case in Messianic a number of years back, and it must have been over 10 years ago, I think, where there were these two nuns or something who were living in the ultra-Orthodox neighborhood in Jerusalem. And I guess the belief was that they were there for missionary purposes. And what I read in the newspaper, at least, is a mob descended on their apartment and burned it, and they had to be removed from the apartment by the police to barely save their lives. Do you know about this incident? Or
I no, not so much, because I heard of it, but it's they were nuns, so they were outside of the scope.
So there is legitimate reason for fear there, and so I understand what you're saying about they don't want to be identified. Some of the congregations,
exactly, but I have to say that the most congregations also. We asked. There's a difference of the language spoken. Also, how much severity of the harassment they experience. But of the Hebrew-speaking congregations, 40% has experienced in the past 15 years some sort of severe harassment. So borderline illegal or like the bomb. But most of the congregations, that would be 60% or 40%, if we have either mild or no experiences of harassment. They live freely, express their faith as they want to with no problems whatsoever.
So it probably depends where they're located as well. I would imagine if they're in Tel Aviv, nobody bothers them. If they're apparently in Arad, they harass people. I don't know why in Arad, and it sounds like Ashdod has some problems too. So I would guess, and here I want to be really careful, but if I had to guess from what you've said and what I've heard, it has to do with the proximity to maybe ultra-Orthodox communities. Would that be? Do you think is that correct, or you don't know?
I will put it this way: it is absolutely correct that it also happens within close proximity of ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods.
Oh, but not only.
But not only.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.